Well, hello there. Welcome to your very first mandolin lesson. If you're just picking up the mandolin for the very first time, then you're in the right place. In this lesson, we're going to cover the basics. I'll show you the different parts of the mandolin. We'll talk about how to hold the instrument, how to hold the pick, how to tune the mandolin, and we're going to get you started on your very first song on the mandolin. But hey, to start with, let me just say welcome to one of the coolest little instrument communities out there. My name's David. I'm a full-time mandolin performer and instructor here in the States, and I love pretty much everything about this instrument. I started mandolin when I was 13, and at the time, I had no idea how much this instrument would change my life. There's so much amazing music to play on this instrument, and so many amazing people who play it, yet the community around the instrument is really small and tightly knit and welcoming, so it's actually pretty easy to get connected with other people, to start making music with others from the start, which I think is awesome. And by the way, if you're already getting more serious about playing the mandolin since we started talking here, then no worries, I got you covered, because this is just the first lesson in a big lesson series for beginners here on the channel. And throughout this series, we're going to look at a ton of stuff together. We're going to check out some chords and some strum patterns. I'll show you how to play some essential mandolin techniques like hammer-ons, pull-offs, and slides. We'll check out some scales and exercises together, and we'll learn about a dozen plus really fun melodies in the bluegrass and old-time traditions, just like the one that you heard here at the beginning of the video. And I actually got a little excited when I was planning this lesson series and kind of accidentally wrote a book to go along with these video lessons. So I'm super stoked to have this 50-page companion ebook that has PDF transcriptions of all the examples, all the songs, all the chords, and written instructions for everything that we'll look at together in this video series. And you'll still get all that stuff on screen as we go through this material together, but if you'd like your own personal copy of this ebook to work on things away from these videos at your own pace, you can grab one over at my Patreon page, and it's available to all patron tier levels. You can check it out at the link in the cards above or in the link in the description below, but more on all that stuff a bit later. For now, let's get to know this instrument a bit better. First up, you might already know this, but there are a bunch of different types of mandolins out there, right? You might have one of those teardrop-shaped A models, or you might have a flat-back pancake mandolin, or you might even have one of those cool Italian bowl-back classical mandolins, right? Some have these pretty big oval sound holes, not too unlike a guitar, right? And then some have these F-shaped sound holes, more like a violin. And what I've got here is called an F-style mandolin. In particular, this is called an F5 because it has these really fancy scrolls on the headstock as well as the body, and these 2 points that come out of the body as well. These don't really change the sound as much as the look of the mandolin, but this is a really popular model that you'll see people play in bluegrass music. But no matter what style of mandolin that you play, most all of them have some similar working parts, and it's helpful to know what the names of these are so you know your way around the instrument better. First up, you got this big part of the mandolin. That's called the body, and there's 3 different parts to the body. First, you have the top. That's where your sound holes are. Then you have the sides. Usually there's some binding on here. And then there's a really beautiful back to each mandolin as well. Next up, we have this metal bit down here. This is called the tailpiece, and this is where the strings are anchored onto the instrument. And as we work our way over, next up we have the bridge. This is a floating piece of wood that's only held in place by the tension of the strings. What happens is, as you play the mandolin, the vibrations of the strings get sent down the bridge into the body of the mandolin, where all that sound resonates in this sound chamber and gets projected out the sound holes. Next up, we have this long piece of wood that extends away from the body of the mandolin, and this is called the neck. This is where you anchor your left hand to be able to play the different notes on the mandolin over here. And on this side of the neck where the strings are, this is what people call the fretboard, and those vertical pieces of metal are what we call frets. And a really important thing to remember here is that all these frets let us know where the different notes on the mandolin are, right? And we keep track of this by numbering off the frets as you go across a string. So here would be our first fret. And then as you go up, we just go up a number. This is your 2nd fret, your 3rd fret, your 4th fret, and your 5th fret, and so on as you keep going. Same is true on all your other strings. So here would be your 1st fret, 2nd fret, 3rd, 4th, 5th. You get the idea. And as you keep going along your mandolin here we have what's called the nut. This is where the strings are slotted into place right before the 1st fret. And lastly, as we get towards the end of the mandolin over here, this general area is called the headstock. And on the headstock, we have these tuning machines and tuning pegs. And what these do is allow us to adjust the tuning of the instrument to make sure that we're in tune with other people as we're playing along, right? And maybe the most important thing about the mandolin are these 8 strings that we have running up and down the mandolin, right? And you'll notice that these strings are tuned in pairs to create 4 sets of courses. And the 2 strings in each pair are tuned to the exact same note, exact same octave. And usually we're gonna play both the strings in the set together all the time. So even though there's 8 different strings, try to consolidate it in your mind to think about it as only 4 strings. These pairs are actually tuned the same as the 4 strings on the violin, right? So we have G, D, A, and E. And the note names of these open strings are going to be really important moving forward. So this is your first assignment, is to see if you can memorize these open string names. And one last thing about the mechanical parts of the mandolin is that sometimes the directional language that we use for the mandolin can be a bit backwards, right? So for instance, this G string seems like it's closest to the ceiling. It's the highest up on the instrument, but people refer to this as the low G string. Also, inversely, this E string is often referred to as the high E string. And the reason is that we're referring to the note itself rather than its physical location on the mandolin. If you think about it, our G string is a lower, deeper, darker sound than the high E string up here. So the G string is a lower pitch than that E string is. And same idea as you come back over here to the fretboard and the neck, right? When someone says that they're playing up the neck, usually it means that they're playing closer towards the bridge up here. And then when they say they're playing down the neck, usually it means down here by the nut. And again, these directions are talking about how high the notes are or how low the notes are. As you play up the neck, all those notes sound really high pitched, right? As when you play down the neck, all those notes sound pretty low. And it's also related to that idea of the fret numbers that we talked about earlier, right? Remember how the fret numbers go up as you keep going up the neck? So keep all that in mind as we move forward, but now let's talk about how to hold the mandolin. And you may have already discovered that the mandolin is kind of an uncomfortable instrument to hold, right? It's small, it's pointy, it's unbalanced, it flops all over the place. So what I'd say is most important is trying to find a comfortable posture to start with. So what I do is try to keep my shoulders really level and relaxed and my back straight. And that usually gives me a good starting place for how to hold the mandolin. Once you got your posture the way you want it to be, try putting the mandolin between your legs like this. I think this is better than putting the mandolin on either thigh because you're gonna have to twist your torso to get to the mandolin. But when you put it between your legs like this, it sets up a really nice central posture for your playing style. And try to keep the body of the mandolin pretty vertical like this. You don't want to tip it too far forward or too far back. Next, we're gonna keep the mandolin neck at about a 30 to 45 degree angle like this. And we're gonna push the neck away from our body as well. So that way our left arm can come up naturally to meet the neck with our left hand where it feels most comfortable. So you got your left hand in place. Let's think about the right hand. And what we're gonna do is we're gonna relax it and come really naturally over the top of the mandolin to rest on the corner of the instrument about right here. I've got one of these fancy armrests here, but you don't need one of these to get started. Just place your arm directly on the corner of the instrument there. And once you've got your 2 arms in place, the mandolin should look something like this on your body. And you want this mandolin to feel pretty sturdy and stable on your person, right? You don't want it to be flopping around too much, or that's gonna create some problems with accuracy as you play later on. And one more thing is that you can also use a strap like this if you want to help make the mandolin feel a little bit more secure on your body. And for these F model mandolins, we usually connect the strap to the end pin down here and then wrap a string through the scroll on the body here. But if your mandolin doesn't have a scroll like this to attach a strap to, some other mandolins will have strap buttons here at the bottom of the neck, or you can take a string and attach it to the end of the strap here and thread it underneath the strings behind the nut so that it's not muting the strings, but it's connected to the headstock to keep the mandolin in place. But the only thing I'd recommend is if you're using a strap is to try to keep the strap low enough so that when you're sitting, you can still support the bottom of your instrument with your legs here. Also, you don't want there to be a difference in height on the mandolin between sitting and standing, right? If the mandolin is different heights between those two, you're gonna have to change your technique, which is also gonna cause some problems later on. So I'd recommend trying to keep it about the same height for both sitting and standing. Well, we've got the mandolin in place now. What do we do with our hands, right? And let's talk about our left hand first. Just a disclaimer here, for this series, I'll be talking directly to right-handed mandolin players. Apologies to any left-handed players out there with lefty mandolins where your hands are swapped. But for the majority of us mandolin players, our left hand is used on the fretboard over here, and our right hand holds the pick and plucks the strings over here. So for the left hand, if you have your mandolin neck at an angle and push forward like this, imagine that you're coming up to shake someone's hand with your left hand, and you want the mandolin neck to rest on the bottom knuckle of your index here. I've got my left hand really close to the nut here at the end of the neck, and then what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna come down and pinch the neck between the pad of my thumb and the bottom knuckle of my index there. And if you can see it here, I'm actually leaving a space between the crook of my thumb and the back of the neck. That way I'm not tempted to choke up on the neck and tense up with my left hand. And let's keep our left wrist really straight here. We don't want to bend it out like this or bend it in because that's going to cause tension in our arm. But if you keep it straight and keep it level, it actually sets up your fingers at a really good angle to bend over and play the notes on the fretboard like this. And as you bend your fingers over to rest on the fretboard, we're going to use the very tip of your fingers to hold down the frets. And you want to place your fingers pretty much directly on top of the frets. That way you're going to get the best sound without any buzzing. And there's a lot more about the left hand we're going to talk about later on in this series, but that's enough to get you going for now. So let's come over to our right hand now. And to start off with, there's the matter of the pick, right? And there's a lot of different picks that mandolin players use. And a lot of folks like using these big triangle picks like I've got here. This is a Golden Gate extra stiff clown barf pick that I really like. It's 1.3 millimeters. It's only a couple bucks. I'll drop a link in the description below if you want to check it out. Also, some mandolin players prefer these rounded picks, which give you a little bit of a darker sound than the triangle picks. This is another Golden Gate. I'll drop a link in the description as well. And there's a lot of different opinions about what pick is best to get the best tone and the best sound on the mandolin, but it doesn't really matter too much when you're first getting started out. Even if you just have one of these teardrop shaped guitar picks, that's enough to get you started. I just recommend maybe using the rounded edge of the pick here, the shoulder, which will give you a little bit of a darker sound starting out. So I'll come back over to my preferred pick here, and let's talk about the pick grip, which is a really important aspect of your right hand technique. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna hold the pick on the side of your index finger right here. Just lay it down on the last segment of your index finger, and then you're just gonna lay your thumb across the top edge like this. And I just keep the rest of my fingers kind of naturally curled up beneath my pick. We don't want to do a clenched fist like this because that'll cause some tension down your arm, but you want to have a nice, loose, relaxed grip. You want the pick to be loose enough to really flex when it goes through the strings. So let's take the pick and apply it to the strings now. And probably the best place to pluck the strings is somewhere here towards the end of the fretboard. You know, if you play with the pick too far down towards the bridge, it sounds really bright and tinny. And then if you play over the fretboard, you get all this pick click, and it doesn't sound quite as nice either. So kind of the happy medium and maybe the best sweet spot for most mandolins is right here towards the end of the fretboard. So, and let's actually try playing here. Take your pick and let's see if we can play through both of those G strings. And it's actually easier using down picks like this, but we're also going to be using some upstrokes later on. So let's try moving the pick upwards through the G strings now. And don't worry too much about accuracy and proper technique at the minute. Right now we're just feeling things out. So try playing through the G strings with both downs and ups, and then try the same thing with all the other strings as well. And don't worry, we're going to talk a lot more about the right hand later on in this series, but that's enough to get you started, so let's keep moving. And one more thing about both our hands is how the hands work together, right? The basic mechanics is that you put your left hand on a fret for a note that you want, and then you use your pick on that string to play that new note. But the hard part is that we change notes and melodies, right? So we have to keep moving our fingers and keep playing the right strings to get the right note that we want. It's a little bit hard to get used to at first, but one of the best ways to familiarize yourself with this mechanic is just to do what we call noodling around, where basically you just play some random notes. Don't worry about what fingers you're playing or what strings you're playing. Just get used to what it feels like to make your right hand and your left hand match up like this. So, noodle away. Well, if you're trying out the pick there for the first time and you notice that your mandolin is a little bit out of tune, let's talk about how to tune this thing. And it's really not the easiest thing to do. With 8 different strings that are tuned in pairs, if one string is out of tune, then the rest are gonna sound pretty bad as well. And the mandolin can be a little bit finicky in the tuning department. You know, changes in weather and humidity or just wear and tear can really make things go haywire, and often one or more strings is gonna go sharp or flat. And if you've never heard those terms before, sharp and flat, all that means is that if a note is getting sharper, it's going higher in pitch, and if a note is getting flatter, it's going lower in pitch. And to adjust the pitch of these strings, that's where these tuning machines come in here. So for these 4 tuning pegs on the G and the D string side of the headstock here, we'll turn the knobs counterclockwise to make them sharp, and we'll turn them clockwise to make them go flat. But the weird thing is that these directions get flipped when you come over here to the A and the E string side, right? So to make our A string sharper, we're gonna turn it clockwise. And to make it go flat, we're gonna turn it counterclockwise. And to make things even more confusing is that sometimes mandolins will have different tuning machines which will mess with these directions even further. So a surefire way to make sure that you're tuning the string in the right direction is just to play the string as you tune it. That way you always know that you're going the way that you want to. So that's the mechanics of how this works, but the harder part is making sure that you're tuning these strings to the specific notes of G, D, A, and E, and also hearing if your strings are flat or sharp in relationship to those notes. And probably the best thing to do is just invest in an affordable electric clip-on tuner like I have here. This is a Diodario micro headstock tuner, and what it does is it just clips on right here and reads the vibrations up and down the neck when I play the strings to let me know if I'm sharp or flat. And usually what I'll do is I'll tune one string to the tuner here, and then I'll tune the other string in the pair to that string that I just tuned. And I do this by playing them together. That way I can hear when they start lining up. Just like that. So electric tuner, super handy. I'll drop another link in the description here. And don't worry, tuning gets easier the more you do it, so try to make this a habit. Every time you pick up your mandolin, make sure you're in tune first before you start playing, because there's nothing worse than an out-of-tune mandolin. All right, well, you've got all the basics down. Now let's put all this knowledge to the test by learning our first song together. And for your very first song, I thought we'd learn this popular old folk song called Moonshiner. This is one that you may have heard Bob Dylan do, and it's also been done by a lot of bluegrass artists like Chris Thile, Molly Tuttle, a bunch of others as well, so it's a good one to know. First up, let's just listen down to this melody and see how it goes so you can get your ears around it. So I'm going to break down this melody phrase by phrase, and we're going to learn it by ear and by sight here in this video, but if you already know how to read tablature or standard notation and you want a transcription of this tune, you can find it in that ebook that I have over on Patreon. And if you already know how to read tablature or standard notation on the mandolin, I'll provide the transcription on screen as we play through this together. But if you don't, no worries. We're going to get to that in a later video lesson. For now, let's just try to learn this by sight and by ear together. And the nice thing about this melody is that we're only using downstrokes with our right hand. We don't have to worry about those harder upstrokes, right? Also, we're only going to be using 2 fingers on our left hand. We're only going to be using our index finger and our ring finger, so you can rule out all those other fingers. So here's the first phrase of the melody. It goes something like this. So here we're starting on our open D string, and we're using our index finger to play the 2nd fret on the D string. So not the 1st, but the 2nd fret up here. For this phrase, we'll also use our ring finger on the 5th fret of that D string as well. This phrase also uses our open A string as well, so watch out for that. Not too bad, right? Let's try to play that one more time to get it in our fingers. All right, on to the next phrase. Let me play this one for you. For this phrase, we're following a really similar pattern to what we did on the D string, only now we're starting on our A string here. So for this phrase, we have 2 notes on our open A string. Then we have a quick note on the 5th fret of our D string here. And then we're skipping over the open A, coming to the 2nd fret on your A string here, before coming up to the 5th fret on the A. Then directly after that, we're playing our open E string, back to the 5th fret on the A, 2nd fret, and then 2 open A strings. One more time for good measure, right? You got this. And here's the cool thing, the next phrase is exactly the same as the phrase that we just played. So you've already got this down, check it out. And now only one more phrase to go. Check out this last phrase. This phrase covers a little bit more ground, right? We're starting on the 2nd fret of our A string. Then I'm coming down to the open A, 5th fret on the D, 2nd fret on the D, down to the 5th fret on the G string. Then we're going up to our open D string, 2, 5, 2, open. All right, one more time. Great work. So once you feel ready, let's try playing through this whole song together with the backing tracks to get a feel for what this sounds like in context. Let's give it a go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Nice work, folks. Thus concludes your very first lesson on the mandolin. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's tons more to learn, and I hope you're pumped to keep going with this lesson series. The next lesson, we're going to check out how to play some open chords and some simple strum patterns to play the chord progression for this song that we just learned, Moonshiner. So it's going to be lots of fun. Also, if you've enjoyed this lesson and you want to see more lessons like this, it would mean so much to me if you would hit like, hit subscribe, if you'd share this with other mandolin friends in your life. It really goes so far to make these videos possible. And if you'd like to support the channel even further, you can check out that Patreon page that I mentioned. You can grab the ebook to go along with all these lessons over there, as well as PDF transcriptions for all my other lessons, even stuff like backing tracks for Moonshiner and all the other songs we're going to look at in this series, and a bunch of other learning resources that you won't find here on YouTube. So check it out if you're interested. Hey, but most of all, thanks so much for watching, and I hope this was helpful for you as you start your journey off with the mandolin. I'm really excited for you to dig in and to keep learning more, and this is just the beginning, right? So I'll see you in part 2.